Russia built its power on illusions, but illusions only work as long as nobody dares to turn on the lights. And one quiet morning, that's exactly what happened. A single update on Twitter, just a line of code, cracked open one of the Kremlin's most expensive operations. Billions of rubles, years of planning, and a digital army built to influence the world all vanished in seconds. What people saw next wasn't a superpower controlling global narratives, it was a frightened state whose propaganda machine had been living behind fake names, fake faces, and fake locations. A network so weak that the smallest transparency feature exposed its entire strategy. And suddenly, the Kremlin's digital empire began collapsing from inside. Because once you shine a light on the shadows, there's nothing left for them to hide behind. Russia's first mistake was arrogance. They believed the world would never notice. For years, they created thousands of accounts pretending to be Americans, pretending to be Ukrainians, pretending even to be pro-Russian patriots living in Moscow. The strategy was simple: flood the internet with noise until people no longer know what the truth sounds like. But what Russia didn't realize was that modern propaganda doesn't collapse from enemy action. It collapses when the system becomes so bloated and chaotic that it can no longer control itself. The first strike happened when Twitter introduced a new transparency feature: location verification. Nothing dramatic, nothing political, just a simple change meant to show where tweets were coming from. It took less than 24 hours for Russia's carefully engineered lie to implode. Suddenly, the self-proclaimed construction worker from Texas who loves Russia was tweeting from inside Russia. A supposed frontline soldier posting reports from Bakhmut was tweeting from Ireland. Putin's official fan account complaining about American media, based in Pakistan, and a Russian army news bulletin calling Pakistan a terrorist state. The tweet was sent from India. In an instant, Russia's digital soldiers exposed themselves as a global circus of contradictions, each one accidentally revealing the truth they were trying to hide. Russia wasn't shaping global opinion. They were outsourcing it. On the ground, the human consequences appeared immediately. Because behind every fake account is a real person sitting in a cramped apartment, hoping that one viral tweet might finally pay for dinner. The update didn't just expose Russia, it exposed the desperation inside countries like India, Pakistan, Nigeria, and Bangladesh, places where $8 per million views on Twitter actually means something. The collapse of Russia's propaganda operation didn't begin on the Kremlin's servers. It began in the lives of people who realized their entire income depended on pretending to be Americans who loved the Kremlin. These people weren't loyal to Moscow. They were loyal to survival. And once the illusion broke, their work fell apart. Russia responded the only way it knows how: denial blended with aggression. When the first wave of exposure hit, Kremlin propagandists attempted to twist the narrative. They said Twitter was running an anti-Russian smear campaign. They said the accounts were victims of Western sabotage. They accused Europe of hacking metadata. But the truth was simpler. Their own network had eaten itself. Because Russia's strategy relied on two pillars: fake identities and bot amplification. When one fell, the other collapsed with it. Real users stopped clicking, bots stopped engaging, and the entire machine began to suffocate. The Kremlin couldn't silence the truth because the truth wasn't coming from the West. It was coming from their own lies unraveling in public. And then came the second escalation. Russia's propaganda collapse landed at the worst possible time, exactly as Moscow was pushing a new peace plan narrative through state media. A plan they claimed was fair, balanced, and designed to save lives. But the world saw something else entirely. A plan built on Russian demands that were harsher than even in 2022. Russia wanted Ukrainian land officially recognized as theirs. They wanted sanctions lifted. They wanted a return to the G8. They wanted 2/3 of their frozen wealth handed back. They even wanted a ban on diplomatic planes entering Ukraine, something so absurd it has never appeared in any peace agreement in modern history. The propaganda collapse didn't just embarrass Russia. It revealed desperation. The Kremlin wasn't negotiating from strength. They were negotiating from panic. This panic extended into Russia's economy. Every year, Moscow allocates the equivalent of $1.5 billion to propaganda. 50 million of that is spent silencing Russians at home. The rest is spent trying to manipulate minds abroad. But when the Twitter update struck, it wiped out the value of this investment. Years of building influence networks were gone. Russia was left with a digital army that nobody trusted, a message that nobody believed, and a growing sense inside Moscow that their information war was collapsing faster than their front lines. And this mattered because Russia's economy, already weakened by sanctions, declining oil revenues, and a shrinking workforce, depended heavily on its ability to control narratives abroad. Propaganda wasn't a side project. It was a strategic pillar holding up a weakening state. When that pillar cracked, so did Russia's economic leverage. Inside Russia's military circles, the collapse created a surprising ripple effect. Officers who spent years believing the world admired Russia's strength suddenly realized that admiration was manufactured. The digital support they thought existed across Europe and America turned out to be scripted in Karachi, Dhaka, and Lagos. Russian soldiers on the front lines who believed they had global sympathy discovered that the sympathy was bought with rubles and maintained with lies. Morale, already low, sank even further. A soldier who thinks he has the world behind him fights one way. A soldier who realizes the world is laughing at his government fights another. Historically, this isn't new for Russia. Every Russian empire, from the Tsars to the Soviets, was built on illusions that suddenly shattered. The Tsarist Empire relied on censorship until one revolution exposed everything. The Soviet Union relied on propaganda until one economic collapse showed the truth. And now Putin's Russia relied on digital manipulation until one software update tore the curtain apart. Russia keeps making the same mistake, believing fear can replace legitimacy, believing illusions can replace strength, and believing that if they shout loud enough, the world will stop questioning. But this time, the reversal came from outside Russia's borders, and it hit Moscow harder than expected. Europeans, Americans, Canadians, Australians, suddenly everyone could see which citizens criticizing NATO were actually tweeting from St. Petersburg, which neutral analysts praising Russia were tweeting from Pakistan, which frontline soldiers were tweeting from cafes in Dublin. The update created a geopolitical shift. Western governments realized they had underestimated the scale of Russian interference online. The Kremlin wasn't running a few bots. They were running a multinational operation with tens of thousands of accounts designed to distort public opinion. And once exposed, it became clear that Russia's influence wasn't as powerful as people feared. It was a hollow empire built on fake identities. Now came the countdown. Russia needed a win, fast. Winter was approaching, pressure was rising, and the Kremlin wanted the world to believe that global support for Ukraine was fading. But the update showed the opposite. Real polling in the US revealed strong majority support for Ukraine from both parties. European surveys showed the same. The online anti-Ukraine wave was largely fake, and without that illusion, Russia's dream of a political victory in the West began to evaporate. Their entire strategy relied on convincing Western voters that Ukraine wasn't worth supporting. But the update revealed a truth Russia feared. The only people cheering for Russia were paid to do so. And then came the final revelation. One Russia hoped nobody would notice. If propaganda accounts in Europe, Asia, and Africa were being run by ordinary people desperate for income, then the Kremlin wasn't in control of its own narrative. They weren't shaping global opinion. They were renting it. Russia created a digital empire, but outsiders built it. Outsiders maintained it. Outsiders profited from it. And once Twitter revealed the locations, those outsiders abandoned the operation faster than the Kremlin could react. The Russian propaganda machine didn't collapse because Twitter attacked it. It collapsed because the people powering it realized it was no longer profitable. And that brings us to the truth. Moscow fears more than anything. A superpower doesn't collapse when it is defeated from the outside. It collapses when it can no longer maintain the lies it tells itself. Russia told the world it was strong. Russia told itself it was respected. Russia told its people that global support was rising. But one tiny update proved otherwise. A digital empire worth billions was exposed as a house of cards. This is not a story about Twitter. This is not a story about algorithms. This is a story about a regime that spent more money on lies than on its own people. A regime that fears sunlight more than sanctions. A regime that built its power on illusions, and now those illusions are fading. Russia can try to rebuild its propaganda machine. They can try to hide the truth again. They can try to blame the West, blame the software, blame the world, anything except themselves. But once people have seen behind the curtain, they don't forget what they saw. The collapse has already begun. Before you go, remember, we're completely independent. No big networks, no sponsors, and no government influence. In a world full of corruption and scripted news, your support keeps real journalism alive. So please like, share, and subscribe. It truly helps.